Morning. Today I want to look at the whole question of the Bible. This is the fourth part in a series of videos called Why Atheism is Wrong. I am going to repeat a lot of stuff I've put out in an earlier video called Is the Bible Bullshit? One of the most common arguments used by many atheists against Christianity is the Bible. They say the Bible is full of fairy tales, full of myths, full of contradictions, full of lies. How can you believe it? Bill Maher, for example, will often quote the most violent passage in the Bible and say, this is in there. How can you believe it was written by God? And this is what many atheists and terrorists have in common. They take their holy scriptures in an absolutely literal way. This has never been the way the Catholic Church has interpreted the Bible. Why is that important? The Catholic Church is the church that gave us the Bible. It has a 2,000-year history of interpreting the Bible. It was the church that collected the different books of the Bible and said, okay, we'll include these books, we won't include these books. It was the church that, in the early part of its history, decided what was the official canon of the Bible. So how it interprets the Bible, I think, is very important, very significant. It never has taken the Bible in an absolutely literal, fundamentalist way. St. Augustine in the 4th century, for example, said that the book of Genesis, the creation accounts, were allegories. They were metaphorical. They were teaching religious truth, not scientific truth. In fact, biblical fundamentalism, as we know it, had its beginnings in the late 19th, early 20th century in Britain and America, and was a reaction against modern interpretation and understandings of the Bible. Let me say from the beginning that I can understand why many atheists are atheistic when it comes to the Bible, because there has been a lot of rubbish, a lot of bullshit done in the name of the Bible. You've got Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, who will not give their child a life-saving blood transfusion because of certain random quotes in the Bible. You've got creationists who say that the earth is only 10,000 years old because of their understanding of the Bible. You've got the Westboro Baptist Church who justify their hatred of gays and everybody else from the Bible. You've got televangelists who are saying that Jesus will make you rich and famous if you donate a certain amount of money. You've got literally 30,000 different Christian denominations all saying that they have the correct interpretation of the Bible. And yes, the Bible was used to justify slavery, the oppression of women, the mistreatment of the earth, the marginalization of gay people. I get all that. I understand all that. But there is another side to the Bible. This is I believe all these things are a misunderstanding, a misuse of the Bible. So how does the Catholic Church understand the Bible? Firstly, it doesn't see the Bible as falling from heaven. It doesn't see the Bible as whispered into somebody's ear by an angel. It sees the Bible as a collection of many different books written by many different authors over hundreds of years. It sees the Bible as written at a time that was pre-patriarchal, pre-scientific, pre-democratic. It was written at a time when people believed the earth was flat, when people believed that the sun went around the earth, when people believed that women were the possessions of men. It was written at a time when tribal warfare was common, and you took other people as slaves and as booty in that warfare. In other words, all these things need to be taken into account when interpreting the Bible. You can't just take the Bible out of the historical and social context in which it was written. It becomes very dangerous to do that. The church believes the Bible is written in many different literary genres. Some of it's poetry, some of it's prayers, some of it's wise sayings, some of it's mythology, some of it's legend, some of it is history. None of it is science. And this, again, needs to be taken into account when interpreting the Bible. For example, the book of Genesis. I've been teaching religion for 26 years in a Catholic school. I have never taught that this book is teaching science. I say it's a religious book teaching religious truth. It is not a scientific book teaching scientific facts. It's not meant to be taken as a scientific book. The Bible, Genesis, is much more interested in who created the world and why it was created. It's not interested in how it was created. That's science's job, to try to tell us how the world was created. The Bible is fundamentally a religious book, teaching religious and spiritual truths, profound religious and spiritual truths. Its main purpose of the Bible is to invite people into a relationship of love and trust with God. That's its main function. Everything else is secondary to that. One way of looking at it is the Bible is made up of three strands: the author, the cultural and historical context of the author, and divine inspiration. And you need to take all those three strands into account when interpreting a passage. Let's take slavery, for example, or the oppression of women. Slavery was justified, is justified in the Bible. St. Paul, in a sense, supported slavery. Slavery was supported in the society of his time. It was just taken for granted that slaves were part of the economic system of the day. But is it divine inspiration? Is slavery really what God wants? Well, all Christian churches that I know of would say, no, it's not. If you took the Bible absolutely literally, you'd have to support slavery. Christian churches don't, because they say, well, no, it may be what the author thinks, it may be what society at the time of the author thinks, but no, this is not divine inspiration. So you have to take these three strands into account when interpreting the Bible. Problems occur when you take all three strands as God's word, as literal. What about the violent passages in the Bible? Well, the Bible is an account of a growth in human consciousness. It's an account of the growing understanding people have of God. So you see the Bible, I mean, it's simplistically divided into Old Testament, New Testament. It's not that simple, but you see a growth in the understanding of God from a mature, primitive understanding to a much more mature and enlightened understanding. So the violent passages in the Bible are more a reflection of the immature, primitive understanding of God. And the Bible is an account of how the human understanding of God has changed and evolved in history. It is not a book of summary points. It's not a book of conclusions. It outlines the process. It outlines the growth. It outlines the 3 steps forward and the 2 steps backwards. And problems occur when people quote and want to take literally the 3 steps backwards. Jesus, for example, he summarizes the main teachings of the Bible into love of God and love of neighbor. So if the question arises, well, how do you know which passages are divine inspiration and which are not? Jesus gives us the interpretive key. He says the interpretive key is love. Is this passage encouraging you to love? Is it encouraging justice? Is it encouraging human dignity? If it is, it's from God. If it's not from God. And you see this Jesus doing this himself. When the woman who was caught committing adultery is brought before him, they say to him, our holy scriptures, our Torah says she should be stoned to death because she was caught committing adultery. Well, Jesus ignores that and tells them basically to get over it. He does not take the Bible literally. He's always accused of breaking the Sabbath laws, the Sabbath rules, which are found in their holy books. He says, man was made for the Sabbath, not Sabbath, he says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So he's always getting into trouble for not taking the Torah literally. For Jesus, compassion always trumps law, always trumps literalism. Compassion is the interpretive key for Jesus. So when people say you are cherry picking, I would say yes, we are cherry picking, but Jesus gives us the litmus test for what to cherry pick. Is it loving? Is it compassionate? Is it forgiving? Is it merciful? Is it helping the poor? well then it's from God. If it's not, it's not from God. So this is very important when you're understanding the Bible. I mentioned some of the ways the Bible has been misused in history. I want to look at some ways very quickly, very briefly now, on how the Bible has influenced history. There's no doubt that the Bible is one of the founding pillars of Western civilization. Its influence, it's had a hidden influence. It's like the salt in Western civilization. You can't see it, but its flavor is everywhere. Or it's like yeast in Western civilization. It's unseen, but it's that which has helped Western civilization to grow. For example, the West hasn't always lived up to the vision of the Bible. The churches haven't always lived up to the vision of the Bible. In fact, sometimes they directly opposed it. But that vision is there. We haven't always lived up to it, but it haunts us. It's in the back of our mind. And in our best moments, we've implemented it. For example, in the first chapter of the Bible, where it says that all human beings are created in God's image and likeness, that verse there became the basis of human rights. This was written, 1,000 years before the American Declaration of Independence. It was written, 1,000 years before the Human Rights Declaration, the United Nations Declaration for Human Rights. Slavery cannot survive in a society that has been heavily influenced by this biblical vision. In a society that says all human beings are created in God's image and likeness, and all human beings are children of God, not just rich human beings, not just white human beings, not just male human beings, not just powerful human beings, all human beings are created in God's image and likeness and are His children. So slavery cannot survive ultimately in a society that really believes that. And that's what happened in Western civilization. Eventually, took us a while, but we got the message slavery was not compatible with the biblical vision. Neither was the oppression of women compatible with the biblical vision. So you see this gradual unfolding, this deepening understanding of what the biblical vision really is trying to teach us. When Jesus, for example, taught that leadership, authority, and power are for service, it's no accident that in societies heavily influenced by this biblical vision, that you had revolutions that toppled and got rid of the absolute authority of kings. And leaders were called ministers, and their main leader was called a prime minister. In other words, the main server. Leadership was seen as service. So the Bible had this vision of leadership as service, as the equality of all human beings. Before the revolutions came along, in the Bible, where Jesus makes as a priority service of the poor. Our society was built on parables like the Good Samaritan, where the person helps the suffering. It's no accident that in Western societies, welfare, healthcare, education of all people is seen as a priority. In the biblical vision, where Jesus not only says that it's important that we help the poor, but where he identifies with the poor, with the hungry, with the prisoner, with the homeless, with the naked, with the sick. He says, whatever you do to them, you do to me. So you have, as part of the biblical, part of the Christian vision, the identification of God with the least in society, which was probably one of the most profound visions, profound ideas in human history. It's no accident that in Western societies, one of their distinguishing features is the rights they give to minorities. They protect the rights of minorities, even of the enemy. I think this is you can trace a direct connection of even political correctness and the rights of minorities with the teaching of Jesus, that God has identified with the least in society, with the poorest of the poor in society. In fact, he says that's where you can find God. Let me just finish with a quote from the brothers Karamazov, from Dostoevsky. I think this quote embodies the biblical vision. Love a man even in his sin. For that love is the likeness of the divine love and is the summit of love on earth. Love all God's creation, both the whole and every grain of sand. Love every leaf, every ray of light. Love the animals, love the plants, love each separate thing. If you love each thing, you will perceive the mystery of God in awe. And when once you perceive this, you will thenceforward grow every day to a fuller understanding of it, until you come at last to love the whole world with a love that will be all-embracing and universal. That is the biblical vision. Thank you for listening.